Every night my father came into my room with a glass of special milk and said, "Drink it all, my daughter. It's the medicine to sleep without nightmares." What he didn't know was that one day his own medicine would become his poison. Good morning, dear friends. What a joy to speak with you today. I'm Amelia Gardner, 76 years old, born in a small town in Montana, but now I live here in this blessed corner of Colorado. The mountain chill reminds me of my childhood, but today, thank God, it's a chill that warms my heart, not freezes my soul. Every morning, I wake up early and brew myself a cup of coffee, the old-fashioned way, with a percolator on the stove. I get my coffee beans from Mr. Oliver at the farmer's market. He roasts them the traditional way, like they did when I was a little girl. This morning ritual brings me a peace that's hard to explain. Afterward, I go to the window to watch the pine trees swaying in the mountain breeze. From my little house, I can see the valleys covered in fog on winter mornings. Looks just like a sea of cotton. It's a view that heals the soul, you know? Even on the coldest mornings, when frost covers everything outside, I have my wood stove burning, warming the house with that special kind of heat that only wood gives. In the late afternoons, I prepare a good beef stew or a hearty casserole, recipes I learned from my grandmother. The smell fills the whole house and takes me back in time. The food from these mountains has history, has memory, has love. Every bite tells a piece of our story, don't you think? I'm sitting on my porch now, with my knitted blanket over my legs. From here, I can see the pine trees swaying in the wind and smell the rain that's coming. My house is small but cozy, with these wooden walls that keep the warmth in when winter punishes us around these parts. I have my porcelain cups lined up on the shelf, my little books of old recipes, and my small radio that keeps me company. If you're enjoying our conversation, do this old lady a favor. Click that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps our story reach more people who might need to hear what I have to share. And you, my dears, which town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this grandma here? Are you drinking morning coffee, enjoying an afternoon tea, or perhaps tucked in bed, getting ready to sleep? Leave it in the comments. I love knowing who the sweet angels are who take time to listen to me. Today I'm going to tell you a difficult story about something that stayed buried deep in my soul for many years. It's about a kind of medicine that doesn't heal but poisons, and about how sometimes we need to create our own antidote to survive. It's not a pretty story, but it's as true as the wrinkles on my face. I was born in 1949 on a small ranch outside of Billings. Back then, winter was even harsher, and frost painted the fields every morning as if invisible hands had scattered sugar everywhere. My father, Eugene Gardner, was a tall man with broad shoulders and hands calloused from working with cattle. He had green eyes, very clear ones, that might have seemed beautiful to someone who didn't know the coldness they hid. My mother, Eleanor, was his opposite, small, delicate, with a smile that could light up even the darkest days of a Montana winter. We had a simple wooden house with a wood stove that stayed lit all day during winter. Life happened around that stove. Mom cooked the best meals, chicken and dumplings, cornbread with homemade butter, and apple pie from the trees in our orchard. We were a small family, just me and my parents, because Mom had complications during my birth and couldn't have more children. Until I was 7, life was simple but good. I'd wake up with the roosters crowing, have warm milk with homemade bread for breakfast, and then go play. On summer mornings, I'd run through the fields with the neighbors' children, Ted and Isabel. We'd play tag between the trees, build little houses with fallen branches, and make up stories about elves living in the tall grass. In winter, when the cold kept us inside, I'd look through the foggy window, drawing shapes on the glass with my little finger while dreaming of spring. At school, a makeshift classroom where Miss Irene taught the children of the area, I loved reading lessons. Books took me far away from that isolated place, made me dream of big cities and different lives. I remember the smell of chalk and lunch served in aluminum cups, oatmeal with cinnamon that warmed our little bellies on cold days. But everything changed when I was 8. It was July 1957, in the dead of winter. Mom got sick with severe pneumonia. Back then, hospitals were far away, medicines were scarce, and by the time my father managed to take her to town, it was already too late. I remember seeing her lying in bed, breathing with difficulty, holding my hand and whispering that I should be strong, that I should always find light even in the darkest places. I didn't quite understand what she meant then, but I kept those words in my heart. The funeral was quick, quiet, with few neighbors braving the blizzard to say goodbye. When we returned home, my father locked himself in his room for 3 days. I heard him crying, breaking things, and then a silence that was even more frightening than the shouting. When he finally came out of the room, he wasn't the same man anymore. It was as if he had become hollow inside. His eyes, once cold, now seemed dead. He started drinking whiskey every night, sitting alone in the kitchen. The ranch was neglected, the animals sold off little by little, the land leased to neighbors. We lived increasingly isolated. It was during this time that I noticed the first changes in his behavior toward me. At first, they were small things. A lingering look during bath time, a touch that lasted longer than it should when helping me put on my coat. I felt a strange shiver, but I didn't understand why. After all, he was my father, right? Fathers don't harm their children. At least that's what I thought. The house, which was once full of laughter and the smell of good food, became cold and silent. The stove was often unlit because Dad forgot to bring in firewood. Meals, which were once moments of togetherness, became mechanical routines, me eating alone while he watched me with those empty eyes. At school, Miss Irene began to notice the change in me. I, who was a talkative and curious girl, became increasingly quiet, with dark circles that betrayed sleepless nights. "What's wrong, Amelia?" she would ask. But how to explain something I didn't quite understand myself? How to talk about the nights when I would wake up to the bedroom door creaking, to the strong smell of whiskey invading my space, to the weight of his body sitting on the edge of my bed. The neighbors gradually drifted away. Mourning has a proper time in the community, and when that time passes, life must go on. But for us, time froze in that winter of 1957. Ted and Isabel no longer came to play. Their mothers made excuses when I appeared at their fence. I think they sensed something was wrong, but in those days, family problems stayed at home, locked away like shameful secrets. At night, I developed my own protection ritual. I would place my only toy, a rag doll my mother had made, at the door, like a guardian. I would quietly say the prayers my mother taught me, asking for protection. And I would try with all my might to pretend I was asleep when I heard his footsteps down the hall. But it didn't always work. That's how the following years of my childhood in Montana went. A lonely girl growing up in the shadows of a house that was no longer a home, but a prison. A girl who learned too early that sometimes the monsters don't hide under the bed or inside the closet. Sometimes they're the ones who should be protecting us from them. It was in the spring of 1958, about 10 months after Mom passed, that the situation started to get really scary. I had just turned 9, and the nights at the ranch were becoming increasingly difficult to bear. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a Wednesday, and I had returned from school more tired than usual. Miss Irene had given a lesson about the seasons, and I was thinking about how spring, which should bring flowers and joy, only brought me more fear. The walk home was long, almost 3 miles on dirt roads. Usually, I went and came back with other children, but that day, for some reason, I returned alone. When I arrived, the house was strangely tidy. Dad had cleaned everything, lit the stove, and even prepared a beef and potato stew that smelled good. I was surprised, and for a moment thought that maybe things could get better. Maybe he was going back to being the father I knew before. "I set the table for us, Melly," he said, using the nickname he hadn't used since before Mom's death. He had even put out an embroidered tablecloth that was kept for special occasions. During dinner, he talked more than he had in the past few months combined. He told stories from when he was young, asked about school, even smiled a few times. His eyes seemed less empty. I allowed myself to relax a little, feeling a glimmer of hope growing in my chest. After eating, I helped wash the dishes while he dried them, like in the old days. "I'll prepare a hot bath for you," he announced, and went to heat water on the stove. A hot bath was a rare luxury in that cold house, and I happily accepted. It was during that bath that things changed. He, who normally left me alone in the small improvised bathroom at the back of the house, decided to stay. "I need to help you wash your hair properly," he justified. His hands in my hair started gentle, but soon moved to places where they shouldn't be. I curled up in the metal tub, trying to protect myself, but he gripped my arm tightly. "Don't be ungrateful. I'm taking care of you," he growled, and his voice was no longer the soft voice from dinner. It was hoarse, strange. His eyes had that gleam that I already knew from the nights when he drank too much. That night, after what happened in the bathroom, I cried wrapped in the thin blanket, biting the pillow so he wouldn't hear me. My body hurt, but the confusion in my head hurt even more. Why would my own father do that? Was it because I had done something wrong? Was it because I no longer had my mother to protect me? But the worst was yet to come. When the old clock in the living room struck 10, I heard my bedroom door open again. I pretended to be asleep, as I always did. I felt the mattress sink with his weight, sitting on the edge of the bed. The smell of whiskey was there, but there was something different. He was holding something in his hands. "I know you're awake, Melly," he said softly. "Look what Dad brought for you. A special little medicine." I opened my eyes and saw a glass in his hands, filled halfway with a white liquid. "It's warm milk with honey," he explained, but there was something in his smile that made me doubt it. "It will help you sleep better and forget the bad things. Everyone needs a little medicine from time to time." I sat up in bed, wary. The liquid didn't look exactly like milk. It was thicker, with a strange smell that wasn't just honey. "I don't want it," I mumbled, trying to push the glass away. His expression changed instantly. His eyes narrowed, his mouth twisted into a thin, hard line. "I'm not asking if you want it. I'm telling you to drink it." His voice was a dangerous whisper. "After what happened today, you need this medicine to erase it from your head. It's for your own good." He grabbed my neck firmly, tilting the glass against my lips. I tried to turn my face away, but he squeezed harder. "Drink it all, to the last drop." The taste was horrible. It wasn't normal milk, not by a long shot. It was bitter, with a viscous texture that stuck in my throat. My stomach immediately turned. "That's it, good girl. The medicine will take effect soon, very soon." As I swallowed that disgusting liquid, he watched with a sick satisfaction in his eyes. It was as if that moment, seeing me swallow it, was as important to him as what had happened in the bathroom. Maybe even more so. When I finished, he looked at me for a few minutes, stroking my hair in a way that gave me chills. "This will be our little secret, okay? Everyone has secrets with Dad. If you tell anyone about our secrets, any of them, very bad things will happen." He had barely left the room when I felt my stomach violently contract. I ran to the chamber pot under the bed and threw up everything, my body rejecting that strange substance with all its might. The noise must have caught his attention, because soon he was back, standing in the doorway, watching me with an expression that mixed anger and disappointment. "I see you don't want to cooperate," he said coldly. "Do you know what happens to children who don't accept Dad's care?" I didn't wait to find out. I tried to run, to get past him at the door, but his hands grabbed me like claws. He dragged me down the hall, across the cold kitchen floor, to the door that led to the cellar. It was a place I rarely went, dark, damp, full of old boxes and rusty tools. "Here you'll learn to value what I do for you," he said, pushing me down the stairs. I fell on the last steps, hitting my knee hard. Before I could get up, I heard the sound of the door slamming and the key turning in the lock. I was in total darkness, shivering from cold and fear. Tomorrow we'll try again with the medicine. His voice came muffled through the door. And this time, it will stay in your stomach, or you'll spend much more time down here. I spent the whole night in the freezing cellar, huddled in a corner, hugging my knees to my chest to try to keep warm. Rats ran in the corners, and I imagined they were my mother's eyes watching me in the darkness, powerless to help me. The next morning, he let me out, but didn't allow me to go to school. "You're being punished," he explained. I spent the entire day working in the house, cleaning, washing clothes in the freezing wash tub outside while he watched me. No food, no water. When night came, everything was repeated. The bath, the afterbath that I don't even want to remember, and then later, the glass with the medicine. This time, knowing what awaited me if I vomited, I did the impossible to keep that horrible thing in my stomach. I closed my eyes, held my nose, and swallowed as if my life depended on it, because, in a way, it did. "See how much better it is when you cooperate?" he said, satisfied, running his hand over my sweaty face. "Tomorrow you can go back to school. But remember our secret. If you tell anyone, you know where you'll end up, don't you?" And so began a terrible cycle that would last for years. On nights when he drank more, the ritual was always the same. What happened in my room when the lights went out, and then the glass with the medicine that I was forced to swallow. On nights when I managed to keep it in my stomach, he let me sleep in my bed. On nights when my body rejected it, it was the cellar, the cold, the darkness, and hunger. At school, I became increasingly withdrawn. Miss Irene tried to talk to me, but I remembered his threats and remained silent. "Is everything okay at home, Amelia?" she would ask. I would just nod, with my eyes lowered. How to explain the unexplainable? How to talk about what happened after the lights went out? How to describe the taste of that medicine that made me nauseated just thinking about it? My grades started falling. My few friends drifted away completely. I had terrible nightmares, woke up screaming in a cold sweat. At church on Sundays, I sat far away from the other children, feeling dirty, different, marked. The pastor talked about sins, and I wondered if what was happening was my fault, if I was being punished for some evil I didn't even know I had done. Over time, I learned to create a safe place inside my own head. While all that was happening, I would transport myself far away. I imagined flying over the fields, swimming in the river, or simply lying next to my mother, like in the old days, listening to her sing softly until I fell asleep. It was the only way to survive without going crazy. With each birthday, I made the same silent wish, that this would be the last year of that nightmare. But the years went by, and the nightmare continued. 10 years, 11, 12. My body began to change, and with these changes, I noticed that something inside him changed too. His sick interest seemed to grow along with the blossoming of my adolescence, and every night, without fail, the medicine ritual continued. "It's for your own good," he repeated, like a perverse mantra, "to erase the bad memories." But the medicine didn't erase anything. On the contrary, it etched each moment even deeper into my soul. When I entered adolescence around age 13 in 1962, the world outside was beginning to change rapidly. I heard on the small radio hidden under my pillow about the Beatles, folk music, the fashions that reached the big cities. Those sounds brought me momentary relief, a window to a universe where I could be just a normal girl. But inside that ranch, time seemed frozen in an endless nightmare. With my body changing, I noticed his gaze becoming increasingly intense, more possessive. "You're starting to look like your mother," he would say, and that, which should have been a compliment, sounded like a threat. The medicine ritual became more elaborate. Now he made a point of preparing it in front of me, mixing the warm milk with something he took from a vial that he kept locked in a drawer. "It's a special ingredient," he explained with a sick smile, "to make the medicine work better." One night, after forcing me to swallow that disgusting mixture for the 1,000th time, he sat watching me longer than usual, sitting on the edge of the bed, "Do you know why this medicine is so important, Melly?" he asked, his voice slurred from the whiskey. "Because it cleanses the soul. It washes away sins." I remained silent, curled up against the headboard, trying to make myself as small as possible. "Your mother never understood this," he continued, his eyes lost in memories. "She refused the medicine, said it was sick, that I needed help." He gave a bitter laugh. "Look what happened to her." Those words fell on me like ice water. Was he implying that? No, it couldn't be. My mother had died of pneumonia. Everyone knew that. "What? What do you mean?" I whispered, my voice almost disappearing. He seemed to wake from a trance, realizing he had said too much. His face hardened. "Nothing." I didn't say anything. He stood up abruptly. "Sleep now. The medicine will take effect soon." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning those words over in my head, a terrible premonition growing inside me. What if my mother hadn't died of pneumonia? What if... It was too painful even to think about. Over the passing months, my health deteriorated. I lived with constant nausea, stomach pains, skin rashes. My hair, which was thick and shiny like my mother's, began to fall out in clumps. At school, Miss Irene insisted that I needed to see a doctor. "Your father needs to take you to Billings, Amelia," she said, concerned. "There's a good hospital there." When I mentioned this at home, he became furious. "Doctors only serve to waste money and meddle in other people's lives," he shouted, breaking a plate against the wall. "It's all in your head. Your mother was always inventing illnesses too." It was the first time I openly rebelled. "It's not in my head. I'm really sick. I think it's because of that." "Medicine you force me to take." His face turned red, then almost purple with rage. He grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises. "Never speak of that again. Never again. That medicine is sacred. Understand? Sacred." That night, the punishment was the worst yet. Not just the cellar, but also the belt. And then, even with my body all sore, the ritual continued. The medicine went down burning my throat, and this time I was sure he had increased the dose of that special ingredient. The taste was even stronger, more bitter, more repulsive. My body violently rejected it. I vomited right there, in front of him, unable to contain myself. I saw his face transform from frustration to murderous rage. "Your body resists because you're a sinner like your mother," he growled, dragging me by the hair to the cellar. "But I'll purify you if it's the last thing I do." I stayed locked in that damp, dark cellar for 3 whole days. No food, just a little water occasionally. He would come down sometimes, watch me in the dark, mumble incomprehensible words that sounded like distorted prayers. During one of these visits, he brought the glass with the medicine and forced me to drink it even there in the darkness. "Until your body accepts it, you won't get out of here." When he finally let me out, I was so weak I could barely walk. My lips were cracked, my whole body ached, and I had dark spots under my eyes that looked like bruises. Still, he insisted I go to school the next day. "You'll say you had the flu, nothing more." At school, I fainted during class. I woke up with Miss Irene giving me water with sugar, her eyes full of tears. "Amelia, for God's sake, what's happening? You're skin and bones." I almost told her everything at that moment. The words were on the tip of my tongue, ready to jump out. But then I remembered what he had implied about my mother. If he was capable of that, what wouldn't he do to me? "It's just a bad case of the flu," I mumbled, repeating the rehearsed lie. She didn't believe it, of course. The next day, a police jeep appeared at the ranch. The sheriff, a man with a graying mustache named Olson, talked at length with my father on the porch. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but from the tense expression of both, I knew the subject was serious. When the sheriff left, my father came into the house like a hurricane. "It was you, wasn't it? You said something to the teacher?" "I didn't say anything, I swear," I cried, shrinking against the wall. He observed me for long seconds, deciding whether to believe me or not. "The sheriff said if I don't take you to the doctor by next week." They'll charge me with neglect." He gave a bitter laugh, as if they knew anything about taking care of a daughter. On the Sunday of that week, he took me to church as he always did, to keep up appearances. Pastor Anselm gave a sermon about the Good Samaritan, about helping those who suffer. He looked in our direction several times as he spoke, as if the message was especially for us. After the service, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was Mrs. Clyde, the pharmacist's wife, a short lady with white hair and kind eyes. "Amelia, dear, you don't look well at all," she said, her voice full of concern. "Come to the pharmacy tomorrow. I have some tonics that might help you." My father, who was nearby, quickly intervened. "Thank you very much, Mrs. Clyde, but that won't be necessary. I'm taking her to the doctor in Billings this week." On the way home, he was strangely quiet. He didn't seem angry, just thoughtful. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to have hope. Maybe, finally, he had realized that he was slowly killing me with that medicine. That night, to my surprise, he didn't come to my room, nor the next night. For 3 whole days, I was left in peace. I began to think that perhaps the pastor's sermon, or the sheriff's visit, or something had finally gotten through to him. On the 4th day, I woke up with him sitting on the edge of my bed, watching me sleep. There was something different in his look. It was no longer that sick lust or contained anger. It was something cold, calculating. "We're going to the doctor today," he announced, "in Billings." My heart raced with a mixture of relief and fear. Leaving the ranch meant a chance, however small, to ask for help. Maybe the doctor would notice something. Maybe. "But first," he continued, taking the familiar glass from his jacket pocket, "you need to take your medicine to stay calm during the trip." I looked at the white, viscous liquid, my stomach turning just from seeing it. "Please, Dad, not today," I begged. "I'll get sick on the bus." "We're not taking the bus. I'm borrowing Nellie's pickup truck." He pushed the glass in my direction. "Drink." With trembling hands, I accepted the glass. Over the years, I had learned that resisting only made things worse. I closed my eyes, blocked out the smell, and swallowed it all at once. "Good girl," he smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now get ready. We leave in half an hour." As I was getting dressed, I realized I felt strangely dizzy, more than usual after the medicine. The walls seemed to ripple, sounds became distant and then too close. When I tried to tie my shoes, my hands wouldn't obey properly. "Dad," I called, stumbling into the kitchen. Something's wrong." He was sitting at the table, calmly drinking coffee. "It's just the medicine taking effect. I put a little more in today, to make sure you'll behave at the doctor's." The words reached my ears as if coming from very far away. I tried to lean on the table, but my arms gave way. I fell to the floor, feeling the world spinning around me. Why?" I managed to mumble. He knelt beside me, his face a blurred spot above me. "Because doctors ask too many questions, Melly, and we don't want that, do we?" He stroked my face with false tenderness. "When we get there, you'll be so drugged, they'll think it's just exhaustion and weakness. They'll prescribe vitamins and send you home. Problem solved." I tried to protest, but my tongue seemed too heavy to form words. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was his satisfied smile, as if he had solved a particularly complicated problem. I woke up in the back seat of the pickup, with the road bumping beneath the wheels. My head was throbbing, my mouth was dry as paper. Through the fog in my mind, I realized we were moving, but not in the direction of Billings. We were going the other way, further away from the city. Where are we going?" I managed to mumble. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes hard as stones. "Change of plans. We're not going to the doctor anymore." "But the sheriff won't do anything. I've already taken care of that." His voice was cold, metallic. "We're going to a place where no one will ask questions, where I can take care of you the right way without interference." Panic settled in my chest, fighting against the chemical fog that still enveloped my brain. He was taking me away. To a place where no one knew me, where no one would miss me. I closed my eyes, pretending I had fallen back asleep. In truth, I was trying to clear my mind, fighting against the effects of whatever he had put in the medicine that time. I needed to think. I needed to find a way to escape. Through half-closed eyelids, I observed the passing landscape. We were on a dirt road, with open fields on one side and a steep embankment on the other, going down to a river that ran below. The Yellowstone River, I vaguely recognized. We were heading west, further and further away from civilization. That's when I had a desperate idea. It was risky, it could kill me. But what awaited me at the end of that journey was probably worse than death. I waited until we reached a particularly sharp curve, where the pickup would need to slow down. Gathering all the strength I could muster, I suddenly opened the door and threw myself out. I fell rolling down the embankment, feeling rocks and branches scratching my skin, tearing my clothes. I heard his furious scream from above, heard the pickup braking abruptly. And then, rolling faster and faster, I hit my head on something hard, and the world went completely dark. I don't know how long I was unconscious, rolling down the slope until I stopped on the muddy bank of the Yellowstone River. When I woke up, I was soaked, with the cold water lapping at my bruised body. Each breath was a stab in the ribs. My head was throbbing, and a warm trickle of blood was running down my temple. Above me, I could hear his voice calling my name, getting more and more distant. I soon realized why. The current was dragging me downstream, slowly. My body had fallen partially into the water, and now I was floating, being carried away. With a superhuman effort, I managed to grab onto an exposed root on the bank. I pulled myself out of the water, dragging myself through the mud like a wounded animal. Every movement was pure agony, but the fear of being found was stronger than the pain. I hid under a tangle of fallen branches, shivering with cold and terror. From where I was, I could see a piece of the road above. I saw the pickup's lights passing several times back and forth. I heard his voice, increasingly desperate, then more angry, echoing through the valley. "Amelia, I know you're out there. Come back now, and the punishment will be less." After a time that seemed like an eternity, the pickup's lights finally moved away. But I didn't move. I knew the father I had all too well. It could be a trap. He could be waiting, hidden somewhere, ready to catch me the moment I came out of hiding. I stayed there, between the mud and the branches, until the sun began to set. The night cold arrived mercilessly, penetrating my wet clothes, making my teeth chatter uncontrollably. My body hurt so much that I could no longer distinguish where one pain ended and another began. That's when I heard a new sound, not the pickup's engine or his voice, but a bark, a dog, and soon after, a different voice, a woman's voice. "Pepper! Pepper! Come back here, you crazy dog!" The dog, a medium-sized brown mutt, found me first. He stuck his nose between the branches, sniffing excitedly, and began to bark frantically. "What is it, Pepper? Found a raccoon?" The owner of the voice appeared on the riverbank a few yards ahead. She was a woman of about 50, with gray hair tied in a loose bun, wearing a simple dress covered by an apron. She carried an improvised fishing rod and a bucket. When the dog continued barking insistently at my hiding place, she approached cautiously. I thought about staying quiet, about not revealing myself. What if she knew my father? What if she was his friend? But then I coughed, an involuntary spasm caused by the water I had swallowed, and she heard me. "Is someone there? Are you okay?" Desperation overcame caution. "Help!" I managed to mumble, my voice almost inaudible. She pushed away the branches and saw me, a 13-year-old girl, bloodied, soaked, shivering. Her wrinkled face contorted in shock. "Holy Mother of God! What happened to you, child?" I tried to get up, but my body wouldn't obey. My world began to darken at the edges again. My father," was all I could say before darkness swallowed me once more. I woke up in an unfamiliar room, lying on a narrow but clean bed. There was a smell of herbs in the air, something like rosemary and chamomile. A lamp flickered on a small table beside me, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. I tried to move and felt a sharp pain in my right side. Looking down, I saw that my ribs were bandaged. My head was also wrapped in bandages. The door opened, and the woman from the river came in, carrying a steaming mug. Seeing me awake, her face lit up with relief. "Thank God, child. I thought I was going to lose you." Where am I?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "My house. I'm Celeste, but everyone calls me Celly." She sat on the edge of the bed and offered the mug. "Lemon balm tea with honey. It'll do you good." I instinctively recoiled. That gesture, someone offering me something to drink, awakened too many terrible memories. She noticed my fear and frowned. "I'm not going to hurt you, child. I'm trying to help." Something in her eyes, a genuine kindness that I hadn't seen in years, made me accept the mug with trembling hands. The tea was sweet and comforting, completely different from the medicine my father forced me to take. "How long was I unconscious?" I asked after a few cautious sips. "Almost 2 days. You had a high fever, were delirious." She hesitated. "You talked a lot during your delirium. About your father, about a medicine, about a dark cellar." I felt my face burn with shame and lowered my eyes. "Look at me, child," she asked with gentle firmness. I raised my gaze, fearful. "I don't know exactly what that man did to you, but I know enough, and I want you to know one thing. It wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault." Something broke inside me at that moment, a dam that had contained years of pain, fear, and shame. I began to cry as I had never cried before, violent sobs that shook my injured body. She hugged me, careful not to press on my broken ribs, and let me cry until I had no more tears. When I finally calmed down, she told me where we were. Her little house was on the bank of the Yellowstone River, about 12 miles from Billings, in an isolated area. She had lived alone since her husband died 5 years earlier, surviving on a small garden, some animals, and what she fished from the river. "He'll find me," I murmured, the terror returning. "He always finds me." "Not here," she assured me. "Almost no one knows I live in this corner of the river. And the few who do aren't the type to talk to strangers." In the days that followed, as my body slowly recovered, I told her everything, or almost everything. I talked about my mother's death, about how my father had changed afterward, about the isolation, the punishments, the cellar. I talked about the medicine he forced me to swallow every night, although I couldn't explain exactly what it was. Celly listened to everything with an expression that mixed horror and compassion, never judging me. Sometimes, when the memories became too unbearable, she would simply hold my hand in silence. A week after my rescue, we heard the sound of a pickup truck on the dirt road that passed almost half a mile from the house. Celly quickly hid me in the cellar, a clean and well-lit place, nothing like the torture cellar at my father's ranch. Through the cracks in the floorboards, I saw when he knocked at the door. My blood froze when I recognized his voice. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm looking for my daughter, a 13-year-old girl, skinny, brown hair. She ran away from home. She's not right in the head, you know. Takes controlled medication." "I haven't seen any girl around here," Celly replied, her voice firm. "I live alone, as you can see. Just me and my dog." "Do you mind if I take a look?" he insisted, the falsely polite tone barely disguising the threat. "Actually, yes, I do mind," she retorted. "I don't like strangers coming into my house. If your daughter ran away, maybe you should ask why instead of chasing her." There was a tense silence. Then I heard his heavy footsteps moving away, followed by the sound of the pickup starting up. When Celly got me out of the hiding place, I was shaking so much I could barely stand. "He'll come back," I whispered. "He'll bring the police. He'll say I'm mentally ill, that you kidnapped me." "The police don't come out here," said Celly, with a confidence I didn't understand at the time. "And even if they did, I have friends in Laurel who can help us. The judge there knew my husband owes us some favors. That night, as we drank tea in the small kitchen, Sally was strangely quiet, thoughtful. "Amelia," she finally said, "what did your father say about your mother? About how she died?" "Pneumonia," I replied automatically, "in the winter of 1957. "And do you believe that, after everything he did to you?" The question hung in the air, heavy as lead. I remembered the insinuation he had made once, drunk, about my mother not understanding the medicine, about, "Look what happened to her." "You think he—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I don't know," Sally replied honestly. "But I think you need to consider that possibility. That night was the worst since my rescue." The nightmares came back with full force, not just the usual ones about the cellar and the medicine, but new, terrible ones, where I saw my mother wasting away in bed, my father forcing that white, viscous liquid down her throat. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. Sally came running, hugged me until the tremors passed. "I need to know the truth," I said when I could finally speak. "About my mother. About everything." "It's dangerous," she warned. "Your father is a violent, sick man. I can't live the rest of my life hiding, not knowing." The next morning, Sally brought an old cookie tin to breakfast. Inside was a small pistol. "It was my husband's," she explained. "I never needed to use it, thank God. But if we're going to do this, we need protection." I stared at the gun, feeling a mixture of fascination and repulsion. I had never thought of physically hurting my father. My fear of him was too great for that. But now, with Sally by my side, with the possibility that he had killed my mother, something changed inside me. That's when I had a thought, an idea as terrible as it was perfect. If he used the medicine as a weapon, why couldn't it be used against him? "We don't need this," I said, pushing the pistol away. "I have a better idea." That same afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table, we developed a plan. It didn't involve direct confrontation or explicit violence. It was more subtle, more fair in a way. "He keeps rat poison in the pantry," I explained. "In a blue bottle, on the highest shelf. He used it to kill the rats in the barn." Sally looked at me for a long time, understanding what I was suggesting. "Are you sure you want to go down this path? There's no turning back after this. He poisoned my childhood. Maybe he poisoned my mother." My voice came out surprisingly firm. "It's fair that he taste his own poison." The plan was simple. We would return to the ranch at a time when we were sure he would be out. Sunday morning, during church service, he never missed it, to maintain the appearance of a dedicated father. I knew every corner of that house, knew where he kept everything. It would be quick, in and out. The hardest part would be afterward, waiting. Waiting for him to prepare his own glass of milk before bed, as he did every night. Waiting for him to drink what, this time, would truly be a medicine, a final medicine for all the evil he represented. The night before executing the plan, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't fear or hesitation, it was a strange calm, a crystalline certainty that I was doing what needed to be done. For the first time in years, I felt I had control over my destiny. "You don't have to do this," said Sally one last time as we prepared to leave on Sunday morning. "We can simply go away, start a new life far from here." I looked at her, this woman who had saved me not just from physical death, but from something worse, the death of the soul, of hope. "I need to end this," I replied. "I need to know that he will never do to anyone else what he did to me, what he may have done to my mother." She nodded, understanding. "Then let's go, and afterward, whatever God wills." With my heart beating like a war drum, I climbed into the wagon that would take us back to the ranch, back to the hell that, I hoped, would soon be just a distant scar on my soul. Sunday dawned with a gray sky, typical of Montana winter. Sally's wagon moved slowly along the dirt road, shaking at every hole. I was huddled under a thick blanket, partly to protect myself from the cutting cold, partly to avoid being recognized by any acquaintance who might pass by. "Are you all right, child?" asked Sally, noticing my silence. "There's still time to turn back." I shook my head no. I need to do this. For my mother. For me. We arrived near the ranch around 9 in the morning. We left the wagon hidden in a curve of the road behind a cluster of pine trees and continued on foot. From a distance, I saw the pickup parked in front of the house. My father hadn't left for church yet. "Let's wait," whispered Sally, pulling me behind a bush. About half an hour later, we saw my father leaving the house, dressed in his Sunday best black suit, the only one he owned. We watched in silence as he got into the pickup and drove away toward town. "Now," I said, as soon as the sound of the engine faded in the distance. We entered through the back door, which I knew was always unlocked. Who would dare rob the house of the respectable Eugene Gardner? The familiar smell of the house hit me like a punch. Old wood, mold, and something indefinable that I always associated with fear. My knees weakened for a moment. "Strength, child," murmured Sally, holding my arm to steady me. "Let's be quick." Knowing every corner of that house, I went straight to the pantry. In the highest corner of the shelf, as I remembered, was the blue bottle with the rat poison. Next to it, another smaller bottle without a label that I had never noticed before. "This must be what he mixed into the medicine," I whispered, taking the smaller bottle as well. With trembling hands, I uncapped the bottle of poison. The strong smell made my eyes water. Sally watched the door, alert for any sign of danger. "Where does he keep the milk?" she asked. "In the refrigerator. He always has a glass before bed." I hesitated for a second. "But there's a better place." I guided Shelley to the cabinet where my father kept his special bottle of whiskey, the one he reserved only for himself. I opened the bottle and, without hesitation, poured a good amount of the poison in. The whiskey was so strong that its smell completely masked the odor of the poison. "Will this be enough?" I asked, unsure. Sally nodded somberly. "More than enough." I closed the bottle and put it back in exactly the same place. Then, moved by an impulse I couldn't explain, I went to my room. It was exactly as I had left it, the simple bed with the patched quilt, the rag doll my mother had made, the small trunk where I kept the few clothes I had. "What are you doing?" Sally asked, nervous. "We need to go." "Just a minute," I replied, kneeling beside the bed. I moved the thin mattress aside and removed a loose board from the floor. It was my secret hiding place where I had kept small treasures over the years. A hair ribbon that had belonged to my mother, some small shells I had collected the only time I went to the river with other children, a storybook that Miss Irene had given me, and, hidden beneath all this, a yellowed photograph of my mother, the only one I possessed. "Now we can go," I said, tucking the photo into my dress pocket. We left as silently as we had entered. My heart was beating so hard I was sure Sally could hear it. The walk back to the wagon seemed to last an eternity, each noise making me startle. When we finally departed, I looked back one last time. The ranch seemed smaller now, less frightening. I knew I would never return there. "And now?" asked Shelley as the wagon slowly moved away. "Now we wait." We spent the rest of that Sunday in a state of nerves on edge. Sally tried to distract me with stories of her youth, with dinner preparations, with anything that could take my mind off what had happened, and what was about to happen. The next morning, I was helping Sally feed the chickens when we heard a rider approaching. It was Nathan, the milk delivery boy from Billings, a lad of about 16. "Mrs. Sally," he called from a distance, "have you heard the news?" Sally and I exchanged a quick glance. My stomach tightened into a knot. "What news, son?" asked Sally, keeping her voice calm. "Mr. Eugene Gardner died last night. They found him collapsed in his kitchen, all purple. The doctor said it must have been his heart." I felt the blood drain from my face. Despite everything, despite every night of terror, every pain he caused me, he was my father. And now he was dead. by my hands. "May God have mercy on his soul," said Sally, making the sign of the cross. "Thank you for the news, boy." When Nathan moved away, Sally hugged me tightly. I stood there, motionless, not crying, not speaking, just feeling a strange emptiness that I couldn't name. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't relief. It was something between the two. "It was justice," Sally whispered in my ear. "Nothing more than justice." That same week, Sally took me to Laurel to talk with her friend, Judge Howard. He was an elderly man with white hair and gentle eyes who welcomed us into his home with coffee and cookies. Sally explained the whole situation, not about the poison, of course, but about the abuse, about the medicine, about how she found me nearly dead on the banks of the Yellowstone River. The judge listened to everything with a grave expression, without interrupting. When she finished, he turned to me. "What do you want to do now, child?" The question caught me by surprise. No one had ever asked me what I wanted. "I want to study," I replied without hesitation. "I want to have a normal life. I want to forget." He nodded thoughtfully. "The ranch and your father's assets are technically yours by right, but I understand if you don't want any of that." "I don't want anything from him," I confirmed. "I just want to start over." That's how, with the help of Judge Howard, I was officially taken in by Celeste as her legal ward. The ranch and my father's few possessions were sold, and the money was placed in an account that I could only access at age 21. Money that, years later, I used to buy my first little house in Breckenridge and to pay for my studies. In the weeks following my father's death, I had terrible nightmares almost every night. I would wake up screaming, sweaty, with the sensation of the bitter taste of the medicine in my mouth. Sally would stay by my side, holding my hand until I fell back asleep. "It will pass," she would say. "With time, everything passes." And it did pass. Slowly, like water that polishes stone, time healed the most visible wounds. I enrolled in school in Laurel, where no one knew my story. I made friends, discovered I was good at mathematics, began to dream of a different future. A year after my escape, I found the small, unlabeled bottle that I had brought from the ranch. I had never had the courage to open it before, but that day, sitting on the bank of the Yellowstone River, the same river that almost killed me and then saved me, I uncapped it and smelled it. The strong smell of ether mixed with something I didn't recognize made me understand instantly. This was the special ingredient that my father put in the medicine, a sedative probably obtained from some veterinarian in the region. This was what made me groggy, what blurred my memory, what made me wake up confused and in pain. Without thinking twice, I threw the bottle into the river and watched it being carried away by the current, disappearing forever. At that moment, I felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I cried for the first time since my father's death, not for him, but for the girl I was, for the lost innocence, for the nights of terror. At 18, I took college entrance exams and was accepted at the university in Denver. Sally, now elderly, encouraged me to go. "Go live your life, child. Don't let the past hold you back." On the day of my departure, she gave me a small package. Inside was the photograph of my mother, which I had rescued from the ranch, now in a simple wooden frame. "To remember that you came from someone good too," she said, with tears in her eyes. And so I began a new phase of my life. Not as the frightened daughter of Eugene Gardner, but as Amelia, student, dreamer, survivor. The past never completely abandoned me, but I learned to carry those memories without letting them define me. Years later, when I already had my career as a teacher in Denver, I returned to Laurel to visit Sally. I found her more fragile, more wrinkled, but with the same kind look that saved me that day by the river. "You know what amazes me most?" she asked me as we drank tea on the porch of her little house. "How broken people manage to rebuild themselves, like plants that seem dead after the frost come back to bloom in spring." I took her wrinkled hand in mine and smiled. "It was you who taught me that, Sally. It was you who helped me bloom again. And so the years went by, like the waters of the river that never stop flowing. I stayed in Denver for more than 3 decades. I built a career as a mathematics teacher, first in elementary school, then in high school. Numbers always made more sense to me than people. They have a logic, a certainty that brought me comfort. I taught hundreds of students over the years. Some still contact me, tell me about their children, their lives. This fills me with pride, knowing that I made some positive difference in this world, even after everything. I never married. There were some relationships over the years, good men who crossed my path. But there was always that invisible barrier that I couldn't overcome, that deep fear that settled inside me when I was still a girl. Over time, I learned to accept that some damage is permanent, like scars that change the way our body functions. In compensation, I built a family of friends, colleagues from the school where I taught, neighbors, some students who became friends over the years. My house was always open for Sunday dinners, for end-of-year celebrations. The loneliness that haunted me so much in childhood was gradually filled by these dear presences. Sally passed away in 1992 at the age of 82. It was peacefully, during sleep, as she always said she wanted to go. I returned to Laurel for the funeral and stayed a week organizing her things. Among her belongings, I found a diary where she had written about the day she found me on the riverbank. "Today I saved a girl," the entry said. Or perhaps she saved me. I had felt without purpose for so long after Ernest died. Now I know what I must do. Help this child rebuild herself. It was at that moment that I realized our relationship hadn't been one-sided. I needed her, yes, but she also needed me. She needed a purpose, someone to care for. We were 2 broken souls who, together, found a way to complete each other. After I retired from school in 2009, I began to feel that Denver no longer suited me. The city had grown so much, was noisy, too busy for this old teacher. That's when I remembered Breckenridge, a small town I had visited several times during my winter vacations. I remember the first time I visited Breckenridge, in the 80s. I was enchanted by the mountain-style houses, the well-kept gardens, the clean air of the mountains. One day I'll live in a place like this, I thought at the time. And now, almost 30 years later, I was fulfilling that small dream. I sold my apartment in Denver and bought this little house where I live today, with its wooden porch and view of the valleys covered with pine trees. I moved in 2010, bringing only the essentials, my books, some clothes, the photo of my mother that Sally had framed for me decades earlier, and a rosemary plant that grew in my small herb garden in Denver. The adaptation wasn't easy, I confess. At 61, I was starting over once again, in a town where I didn't know anyone. In the first few months, the loneliness hit hard. I spent hours on the porch, looking at the mountains, questioning if I had made the right choice. It was during one of these afternoons of contemplation that my neighbor, Mrs. Zelda, appeared with a cinnamon cake still warm. "You shouldn't spend so much time alone," she said, with that frankness characteristic of mountain folk. "Come on, come have some coffee at my house. I have a group of friends who meet every Wednesday to play cards." That's how I joined the Card Club, as we affectionately call ourselves. 5 ladies between 60 and 80 years old, all with fascinating life stories. Zelda, who raised 6 children alone after her husband died in a factory accident. Louise, who was a midwife for more than 40 years and brought half the population of Eagle into the world. Maddie, who left everything at 50 to open a bed and breakfast in Breckenridge. And Irene, who at 75 decided to learn to paint and now sells her canvases at craft fairs. With them, I learned to laugh again. To really laugh, the kind that comes from deep in the soul and shakes the whole body. Our Wednesday afternoons are sacred. We play cards, gossip a little, just the necessary amount, as Mrs. Louise says, exchange recipes, and, mainly, support each other. It was Irene who encouraged me to try painting. "It's therapeutic," she assured me. "It helps to bring out what's trapped inside." I started with small watercolors, mountain landscapes, the flowers in my garden. I don't have Irene's talent, but I discovered that the process itself, concentrating on the colors, the shapes, the movement of the brush, has an almost meditative effect. Gradually, I became more involved in the local community. I give math tutoring to elementary school children. Twice a week, 3 or 4 little ones appear here at my house with their notebooks and pencils, and we spend the afternoon among numbers and problems. Seeing their little eyes light up when they understand a difficult concept gives me the same satisfaction I felt in the classroom. I also participate in the storytelling group at the municipal library. Once a month, we gather to read to the children. It's curious how some stories affect me more now, in old age, than when I was young. Stories about loss, about new beginnings, about finding strength in unexpected places. Sometimes I need to pause in the reading because emotion tightens my throat. My routine today is simple, but satisfying. I wake up early with the birds singing. I prepare my coffee and go to the porch, where I watch the day dawning over the mountains. Then, I take care of my small garden. I have some flower beds and medicinal herbs that I learned to cultivate with Chelly so many years ago. The days pass peacefully, following the rhythm of the seasons. In winter, which is harsh here in the mountains, I spend more time inside the house, near the wood stove, reading the books I accumulate throughout the year. In spring, when everything blooms, I spend hours in the garden, talking to my plants. In summer, I take advantage of the weather to take short walks around the neighborhood, greeting neighbors, stopping for a chat here and there. In autumn, which is my favorite season, I like to sit on the porch and watch the leaves falling, in a silent dance that reminds me that everything in life is temporary. Sometimes, when the night is clear, I look at the stars and think about how life takes turns. That terrified girl from the ranch in Montana would never imagine that one day she would be here, at peace, owner of her own life. I think of my mother, who didn't live long enough to see me grow up. I think of Sally, my savior. I even think about my father, not with anger or fear, but with a kind of distant pity, for having been such a broken man that he only knew how to break others. And when the nightmares occasionally still come, because yes, they never completely disappear, I wake up, take a deep breath, and remember, I am safe now. I am 76 years old, a whole life built with my own hands, and no one will ever take that away from me. My dear friends who have stayed with me until the end, thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for listening to such a difficult story. It's not easy to open old wounds, even when they've healed. But I believe that sharing our pain can help other people who are going through difficult times. If you are living your own nightmare, I want you to know, you are not alone. And more importantly, it is not your fault. I learned throughout my journey that sometimes the monsters don't hide under the bed. Sometimes they are the ones who should protect us. And the worst kind of pain is that caused by those who should love us. I learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our ability to start anew each day. Every morning I wake up and see the sun rising over the pine trees is a victory, proof that I survived. My wrinkles are survival maps. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. Life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never completely goes out. Even in the most desperate moments in that dark cellar, there was a small flame inside me that refused to die. It's that flame we need to protect, to nurture, until it grows strong enough to illuminate our way out of suffering. I never allowed my dignity to be completely stolen, even when they tried to take everything from me. It was this persistence that kept me alive, that gave me the strength to jump from that pickup, to plan my escape, to rebuild my life. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take any more. So many times I thought I would give up, that there was no more hope. But there was. There always is. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. I never forgot what I went through, but I learned not to let those memories define who I am. My story is not about what was done to me, but about how I chose to respond. I learned that true strength isn't in never falling, but in getting up every time. And I fell many times over the years. There were dark days, nights of nightmares, moments when the past seemed to pull me back to that room on the ranch. But I always found the strength to get up again, to keep walking. Abuse leaves invisible scars, but recovery shows that we can flourish even after the storm. Like flowers that bloom more beautifully after the harsh Montana winter, we too can flourish after the greatest difficulties. I discovered that my voice, even trembling, has power when I decide to use it. That's why I'm here today, sharing my story with you. Because I believe that words have power, power to heal, to connect, to transform. Age has given me the wisdom to understand that it's never too late to start over. At 61, when many think life is ending, I was beginning a new chapter in Breckenridge. Because life isn't a straight line. It's a winding path, with unexpected detours and surprises along the way. My experience has taught me that our story doesn't end with the painful chapters. There's always a blank page waiting to be written, a new dawn after the darkest night. I learned that surviving is a form of resistance, and living well is the best revenge. Every smile, every moment of peace, every small joy I experience now is a victory against those who tried to destroy me. If you're going through a situation of abuse, I ask you to seek help. Today, there are resources that didn't exist in my time. Hotlines, shelters, professionals prepared to handle these cases. Don't wait until the limit, as I did. There's no shame in asking for help, no weakness in seeking a way out of suffering. And if you know someone who might be suffering, extend your hand. Sometimes all we need is a celly in our life, someone who believes in us, who helps us see that there is a future beyond the pain. You can be that person for someone. Be alert to the signs, the sudden silence, the frightened look, the changes in behavior. Sometimes the greatest kindness is asking the right question at the right time. Before I say goodbye, I want to ask a special favor. If my story touched your heart, if you felt some connection with my words, click the subscribe button and share this video. Not for the number of views, but because perhaps somewhere there is a person suffering in silence who needs to hear that it's possible to survive, that it's possible to rebuild life even after the deepest traumas. And leave in the comments a word of strength. It could be hope, rebirth, courage, any word that represents for you the human capacity to overcome adversity. Let's create a chain of support and welcome for those who need it. Do it now. Don't wait even one more minute. Your action can literally save a life, can give courage to someone who is at their limit to seek help or move forward. And remember, just as I found peace after the storm, you can find it too. Don't give up, my dear friends. Life still has so much to offer. You just need the courage to take one more step. From the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for listening to me. May God bless each one of you, and may the peace that I have found today also dwell in your hearts.